Welcome to the Cashflow Project podcast. Are you looking to better your financial situation by increasing your cash flow? Too busy to hunt for real estate deals or don't know where to start? Then you're in the right spot. Join us as we dive in and talk about investing for cash flow using multifamily real estate.
Welcome to the Cashflow Project podcast. I'm your host, Steve Fieros with Tri-City Equity Group. Today, I'm excited. We're going to learn a little bit about cost segregation and strategies on how to impact your business in a positive way using cost segs. But we've got Erik Oliver on the show to talk about it with us. So Erik holds a Bachelor of Applied Science in Accounting from Westminster College. Prior to joining Cost Segregation Authority, he was an operations manager for a multi-million-dollar landscaping and design firm in Long Island, New York. He's headed west now, so he's no longer in New York, but he did join Cost Segregation Authority there. And he's been speaking at local, regional, national events, obviously talking about a very, very powerful strategy that we use in our own personal projects and for our company projects. Obviously, with him, he's going to bring a passion for identifying cost savings and educating commercial real estate owners on the benefits of cost segregation. Hey, Erik, welcome to the show.
Hey, thanks for having me, Steve. I'm glad to be here.
Yeah, absolutely. No, I appreciate you hopping on and sharing a part of your day and helping to educate me and educate our audience on the power of cost segregation and really just anything that we can provide our audience with that is a additional tool belt, so to speak, what they can apply towards their business, their investments to help kind of maximize what they're doing and fast track success for them. But before we kind of dive into that, give us a little bit of your backstory. How'd you get started in the business? How did you get to working for Cost Segregation Authority at this point?
Yeah, no, that's a question my kids ask me all the time. They're like, Dad, did you know you wanted to be a cost seg specialist when you were in my age?
Right.
I'm like, no, had no clue. So kind of the backstory there is grow up in Salt Lake City, Utah, as you mentioned, went to school here, was trying to get out of college as quickly as I could. Math always came somewhat easy. So it was either going to be a finance degree or an accounting degree. Never good at English, never good at writing papers. Sciences, wasn't good at that either. So I'm like, okay, it's got to be math. The accounting degree was what was going to get me out of school the quickest. So I ended up going the accounting route. Graduated school, kind of got into a business development role. Never really used my accounting degree. That business development job took me from Salt Lake to Virginia for 12 years, and then from Virginia to New York for 5. I was looking to head back west, like you mentioned, and started looking for jobs and came across this thing called cost segregation. And I knew it had to do with real estate, which is something I've always been interested in, and then it had to do with accounting. And I said, okay, well, let me look into this. And quite honestly, between you and I had to Google what cost segregation was before I interviewed here, so I looked like I knew what I was talking about. So anyways, ended up getting the job here. I've been doing it for 8 years. Have loved it. Love working with investors, CPAs across the country, trying to reduce tax liabilities by doing cost segregation. And so that's kind of what brought me here.
Right on. Very cool. It's a part of the journey. It's like where it takes you and you just got to dive in at a certain point and
Right.
the doors will start to open up.
That's
Very
right.
cool. Well, I mean, I'm pretty familiar with cost segregation, but for a lot of our listeners may not be, and they may not know exactly what we're talking about. They're like, Steve, I have no clue what you guys are talking about. Like what cost? Yes, I get that. What is a cost segregation study? Give us a kind of high level overview. Like what is a cost seg, as we commonly all refer to it in the industry? What is it and what kind of benefit is that to investors and to property owners?
Yeah. So cost segregation really is just accelerated depreciation. So one of the benefits of owning real estate is the ability to take depreciation against that asset. So the IRS or the government has determined that a commercial building depreciates over 39 years. A residential building or somewhere where somebody lives depreciates over 27 and a half. So just to make the math easy for the listeners, let's say you have a $275,000 single family rental. Essentially, you take that 275, divide it by 27 and a half, and you're going to get about a $10,000 write-off every year for the next 27 and a half years. Now, I've oversimplified that a little. Land is non-depreciable, so you always have to back out your land value. But the idea is you get this non-cash expense that you get to deduct from your income every year as an expense. And that's one of the benefits of owning real estate is being able to take these depreciation expenses. Well, cost segregation looks at it and says, well, I may not own my building for 27 and a half years. I want my deductions at a faster rate. And so how can I do that? And just as the name implies, cost segregation, we go in and segregate the cost of your building. So when you buy that $275,000 single family rental, you're not just buying the land and the walls, you're also buying a driveway, you're buying a retaining wall, you're buying a fence, you're buying a sprinkler system, you're buying washer and dryer, flooring, window coverings, cabinets, countertops, all those things I just mentioned, should be depreciated at a faster rate according to the IRS. The IRS, for example, says carpet depreciates over 5 years, your driveway over 15 years, your fence over 15 years. The challenge is when I buy my home, I usually just take my closing statement to my tax preparer and say, hey, I bought this property this year. I need to add it to my tax return. Well, your tax preparer has no idea if there's carpet in that building, let alone what the value of that carpet is in relation to what you paid for it. And so a cost segregation study comes in, identifies all those different assets within your building and puts a value to them and say, okay, of your $275,000 purchase price, you've got $13,000 worth of carpet. You got $8,000 worth of cabinets. You got a $24,000 driveway. By doing that and providing a revised depreciation schedule to your tax preparer can now depreciate your carpet over the correct useful life. So I always, the way I describe it to my kids when they ask them, like, it's like when you go to McDonald's and you buy a hamburger, you pay, I don't know, $6 for a burger. We're breaking it down and say, okay, well, you paid $6 for the burger, but the pickle was 72 cents and the patty was $1.20. And you're just breaking down all those components for tax purposes. And the idea is the bigger deduction you can get up front, the more cash flow you can save up front or cash flow you can generate up front. And then you got to look at things like time value of money. A dollar today is worth way more than $1 27 and a half years from now. So that's why investors will typically say, hey, I want my deductions now versus letting the IRS hold on to these for the next 27 and a half years. So that's kind of cost segregation at a really high level.
Yeah, no, and it's a really powerful strategy too, because you talk about the time value of money. It's like, well, okay, like inflation is a hot topic right now. And it's like, okay, like, hey, publish rates. Okay, even though whatever, they're not necessarily going to be accurate. It's like, okay, even if they're just saying like, hey, it's 4%, 5% inflation. It's like, well, I know it's probably way more than that. So think about that. Okay, like if I have that value tied up, let's say, then that means 5 years from now, like I have a significant amount of value that I've lost. So if I could pull those resources back, let's say to now, they're going to have the most value now. So I'd actually rather have that now to be able to kind of kick into motion that capital, those resources, and start putting it to work now. So they
Right.
can start generating more and more value, more and more income through whatever methods we take it and invest it. And so like, it's a very, very powerful strategy because like that, you're not waiting for the 27 and a half. I mean, most people are never even going to hold their value.
Right.
Like, let's say, be curious and maybe like how many people, like what percentage of people actually own their house that long? It's some slim to none like
Investment
now.
properties, yeah, it's
Oh
not
yeah.
like primary residence maybe, but investment properties, you're typically not holding them for 27 and a half, certainly not for 39 years. And so, like you mentioned, it's a great way to redeploy that money, whether you're paying down your debt, you're going and putting that down on a new asset that's going to be creating cash flow and equity over time. It's just a great way. I would much rather put that money towards a new asset versus letting the IRS hold on to it for the next 39 years. And so it's a great way to build wealth at a faster rate.
Oh yeah, 100%. And if you guys are, and just to kind of think of it as an amplifier, because again, that money that you would have put towards paying towards Uncle Sam, you could now bring that back into, no, I want to get that redeployed back out into the marketplace, earning more. That's going to help me to acquire more property, right? And we start this process kind of all over again and really fast track our investment strategies. Now, Eric, is this something that will work for, like I've got a mom and pop investor and maybe they've got a single family, kind of just a long-term rental out of state. Is this a fit for me? Or is this only something that applies towards these commercial multifamily owners? Like, is it something that I can do?
Yeah, no, that's a great question. So in the past, historically, cost segregation was for your larger institutionalized investors. So you had to have $1 million building for cost segregation to make sense because the benefit was lower. The fees to get the study done were higher. And so it kind of penciled out at about $1 million building. In 2017, with the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act, there was something that went into place called bonus depreciation. And bonus depreciation essentially puts cost segregation on steroids and makes the benefit bigger, quicker, if that makes sense. And so with bonus depreciation, we've been able to do everything from single family rentals. So let's say you've got a $200,000 single family rental. There was a period of time there during bonus depreciation, during 100% bonus, where that $200,000 asset, it might get you a $60,000 or $70,000 write-off in year one. And so a $70,000 write-off, if you're in a 30% tax bracket, you do the math there, that's $21,000 in tax savings. And a study on a single family rental like that might cost you $3,000 to do the study. So yes, definitely. I will always tell or always advise investors, if you've got an asset with a depreciable basis of over about 200,000, it's worth looking into cost segregation. Now, if you're buying a home in a downtown area for $40,000 and you're going to have to plug some bunch of money into it, the $40,000 asset, you will save money by doing cost seg, but that money, that tax savings is going to be eaten up in the fee to get the study done. You might save a couple $1,000s, but if it costs you a couple thousand to get the study done, it's just a wash. But anything over about $200,000 is worth looking into. We'll have to see what happens with bonus. I know I mentioned it. Bonus is starting to phase out. So any assets bought between 9/27 of 17 and 12/31 of 2022, those were eligible for 100% bonus. Anything bought in 2023 was eligible for 80%. Here in 2024, it's 60%. And it goes down 20% each year until 2027 when we're down to zero. Now, in saying that, there was some legislation put in front of Congress earlier this year to extend the 100% bonus through 2026. It passed the House almost unanimously. It had bipartisan support. It got to the Senate, and there was a few senators that said, "Hey, let's not pass this year. We're in the midst of a presidential election. We don't want this to look good for the current president, so we're going to go ahead and not pass it. We'll get back together after this presidential election here in November, and then they're going to revisit it." And my prediction is, again, this is just my prediction, is that they will pass and extend the 100% bonus regardless of who wins the White House. Believe it or not, a lot of the folks in Washington own real estate, whether they're Republicans or Democrats, and they want bonus depreciation to be around. They may not tell you that, but they do. They want bonus depreciation to be around. And the other part is that this bonus legislation is also tied to the child tax credit. So both of them expired at the same time. And so if the Republicans can agree to give the Democrats the child tax credit, then the Democrats will agree to give the Republicans these business credits. Everybody's happy, everybody wins. And so my guess is after this presidential election, regardless of who wins, Congress will get back together. They'll put together a comprehensive tax bill. They'll present it early January or February of next year. It'll get passed. And then for our 2024 taxes, which we'll file next year, I'm hoping that we'll be able to take advantage of 100%. But as the law stands right now, it's 60%, then we'll slowly phase out.
Gotcha. Yeah, I do appreciate that insight into that, and that's a little bit of a kind of a pulling the curtain back from Eric's perspective, just like you said, right? Like, hey, none of this is financial advice. Like, please do not go.
Don't go buy a
back,
property. And Eric told me it was going to be 100% in 2024, so I went and closed on a property before December. Don't do that. No, that's just my prediction, but we'll have to wait and see what happens.
Right. It's totally a wait and see. I mean, a lot of stuff is kind of hinging on the election, but yeah, please do not. Well, what we know right now is, hey, we've got 60% right now. And that's going to continue to sunset, kind of to wind down, like as we move forward until they make some other kind of change. So that's you can plug that into your underwriting, to your calculations, and kind of make decisions based on that moving forward. Now, I'm kind of curious, like we've been pretty volatile like this last stretch with like interest rates and insurance costs and all that kind of stuff. Have you seen an uptick in people actually exploring cost seg as a tool, or is it just, hey, it's gotten more notoriety this last several years? I feel like it's been more on people's radar than it was previously. I mean, you've been in the business now for 8 years. So have you seen an uptick in visibility, I guess, for the strategy itself or implementing it?
No, definitely. And I think a lot of that is attributed to the bonus depreciation, because prior to bonus, it was really for your larger institutionalized investors. And so I even will meet with some CPAs. Part of what we do here at our firm is we go out and train CPAs on cost segregation and implications of it. And I'll meet with some CPA. They're like, "Oh, I've heard of cost seg, but that's just for your casinos, your hotels, your hospitals." I'm like, "No, it used to be that way. But because bonus depreciation, again, it's kind of like putting cost segregation on steroids. It amplifies the benefit. Cost segregation now is applicable to a lot smaller investor. And so, I mean, when I first started, when I Googled cost seg to find out what it was, there wasn't a lot of information out there, a few articles. But now if you Google cost seg, there's podcasts, there's trainings, there's all kinds of information, white paper. So it's become a lot more powerful. And I think because of that, there's a lot more of us in our industry who are doing it, which means the fees have come down, the benefit has gone up. And so overall, we have seen a big uptick in the amount of people who are looking into cost segregation. Obviously, with interest rates going up, transactions are down, and so there's not as many buildings that we can do cost seg on. But cost segregation is kind of sheltered from that in that when you're not out buying more properties, you're usually looking for more deductions. And so one of the benefits of cost segregation is the ability to do these on assets you've owned in the past. So let's say I bought a property in 2014. I'd never heard about cost segregation until I listened to this wonderful podcast. And now all of a sudden I've heard about it and now I want to do it. You can still go do cost segregation on that asset you bought in 2014. You don't have to go back and amend any prior year tax returns. You get to bring all that missed depreciation from 14 to the current tax year, 2024, drop it on your return without having to amend. There is a special tax form. It's called the 3115 change in accounting method. You do have to fill that out. And it's actually kind of interesting. On that form, Steve, when you fill it out, you're checking a box that says you're going from an impermissible method of depreciation to a permissible method. So you're essentially telling the IRS, hey, I screwed up I bought it in 14. So for the last 8 years, I screwed up, 10 years. For the last 10 years, I've screwed up my depreciation. I should have been depreciating my carpet over 5 years. I had been depreciating it over 27 and a half. I'm going to make that correction now, and that's going to create a large deduction on my current tax return. So again, one of the added benefits is the flexibility to do this cost segregation study when you find the time most advantageous in terms of your tax bracket. So if maybe you weren't in a high tax bracket in 2014, but you find yourself with a huge tax liability in 2024, you just keep that cost seg in your pocket for all those years and you play that card when you find yourself in a high tax bracket with a high tax liability.
Right, because like if you generate, let's say, I mean, it's because it's effectively, it's kind of like a paper loss. So like and those losses they don't expire. Like those can carry forward, indefinitely. So just to Eric's point there, like, hey, it is that can be a very powerful kind of a trump card. Like, it's like, hey, I'm going to hold on to this guy until I actually need it. Right. And you can be strategic with how you position that and kind of play with your income a little bit. And you're just doing it from a strategic standpoint. Right. And this is the power of actually understanding the tax code and kind of learning how this works to your benefit, to your favor. Right. Because people, hey, I don't know what the heck this is. Like, I don't know what Eric's talking about. Like, no, look, this is a very powerful strategy. And this is one of those ways where it's like when you hear people like, okay, certain people that name will not be named. It's like, well, how do they not pay taxes? Well, guess what? Like there's a lot in the tax code that if you know how to use it to your advantage, it's very powerful. It's all there too. It's not just like you said, people, it doesn't matter what part of the aisle the legislators are on, they own a lot of real estate. And so like there's a lot in the tax code that has to do with real estate. So it behooves you as an investor, as a savvy investor, to seek out people like Eric to learn as much as you can. Hey, how can I do this? How does this make sense in my situation? Is this a benefit to me? Because it's very powerful. I can tell you that for sure.
Yeah. And on that point, Steve, I'll just add, as you start to build that real estate portfolio, because there are so many tax advantages for real estate investors, it's very important to make sure that you are partnered with a CPA or tax preparer who really understands real estate. So we're kind of a niche accounting firm where even at our firm, we don't do tax returns here. But if I was an investor, I would definitely make sure that I am partnering with somebody who really understands real estate. I see far too often, I've got horror story after horror story where they're like, oh, my dad's buddy from high school does our tax returns. He did my father's returns. He does my returns. And I look at these returns. I'm like, wait, but you just wrote a check for $120,000 in taxes last year and you own all this real estate. Like what's going on? And it's so important that as you start to build your portfolio and your investments become more and more complex, that you're seeking out and finding the right tax advisor versus tax preparer. I think that's a big distinction. Your tax preparers, they take your facts, they run it through their machine and it spits out a number. Where a tax advisor will try to alter your facts within the law to be able to say, okay, we're going to make these contributions here. We're going to spend this money here. We're going to make these decisions here so that we can reduce our tax liability and be proactive versus waiting till next March. We take our statements to our tax preparer, they run it through their system and they tell us what we owe. So just make sure, again, for the listeners, if you guys are starting to build that real estate portfolio, find somebody who is a tax advisor versus a tax preparer. It makes all the difference in the world. Now, they will charge more money, and I promise you, Steve, they're worth every dollar that they charge, because if they're charging you an extra $1,000 to do your tax return, chances are they probably saved you 10x that in taxes if they know what they're doing and they're sophisticated in real estate. So just a
Yeah.
word to advise there.
No, absolutely. Because like that, even just, hey, yeah, I'm going to point, hey, have you considered this? You've got this asset over here. Have you done a cost seg study on it? They don't take that long. This can be a huge, huge chip. I mean, they can be well worth what you would pay over. And I really do appreciate that you made that distinction of the advisor versus the preparer. That it's a huge difference
Right.
because somebody H&R Block, no knock on H&R Block or whatever.
No.
Like they're just going to prepare or whatever. They're just, again, like you said, they're going to plug it in their machine. They don't know anything about real estate. They don't know anything about working with investors or working at kind of a higher level of advisement. They don't know anything about this, right? They're not going to be able to tell you anything about this. So you got to know who's savvy enough that can help to guide you through the process. So yeah, I appreciate you making that
Yeah.
distinction. Yeah, no, huge one. Another quick question too. So like short-term rental operator, is this something that we can use for people doing Airbnbs and short-term rentals, or is it only restricted to, like, let's say, long-term rental assets?
No, short-term rentals are kind of a popular topic right now. And the reason for that is these deductions, I'll give you a real life example. I'm a W-2 employee here. My wife, she works in the school district, and we own a long-term rental. If I do a cost seg study on this long-term rental and I create a $100,000 deduction, that $100,000 deduction cannot be used to offset my active income or my W-2 income, and it cannot be used to offset my wife's active income. Now, it can be used to offset our rental income because that's considered passive income. So that $100,000 deduction is a passive deduction that has to be used to offset passive income. There is, I hate to even use the word term loophole because it makes it sound like you're doing something nefarious. It's not necessarily a loophole, but it's the way the tax code is written. Oftentimes, when you're investing in a short-term rental, which I did, I had a tax liability at the end of 2022. I was going to have to pay $80,000 to the government. And I said, hey, if I go invest in a short-term rental and I actively participate in the management of that short-term rental, that becomes an active deduction. So think about it this way. Your long-term rental property, that's a rental property. Your short-term rental, as long as the average stay is less than 7 days, it gets treated more like a hotel. And so I am actively managing my hotel, my Airbnb. Because I'm actively managing it, that becomes active income for me, which means I can use the deductions from that are now considered active deductions, and they can be used to offset my income. So I had an $80,000 tax bill. I put a $60,000 down payment on a short-term rental, and I was able to get back in tax savings about $47,000 of that $60,000 down payment. Had I not done that, I would have just sent that money to the IRS and I would have paid my taxes and they would have, I don't know what they do with our tax money, quite honest with you.
Mismanaged it somehow, but
She would have probably mismanaged it somehow. Somebody would have got a new suit or something in Washington. I don't know. But I looked at it like, hey, this is an opportunity for me to build long-term wealth. I want to invest. The place that I invested in, Steve, wasn't even so much for the cash flow. I mean, the property breaks even. I make a little bit of cash every year, but I was doing it strictly as a appreciation. I hope that this property goes up in value over the next 5 or 10 years. And I got my $47,000 in tax savings. That's why I bought this property. It wasn't because I was going to make a ton of money month to month renting it out. I just did it from a tax play and from an appreciation play. But again, so there is some unique instances on short-term rentals where if you are a high W-2 earner, you might want to look at investing in short-term rentals. As long as the average stay is less than 7 days, as long as you can show what they call material participation, which means you're actively managing the property, then there may be an opportunity for you to create a significant tax savings for yourself.
yeah, correct. And just to Eric's point there, like again, talk to your tax advisor for one, because neither one of us we're not into your personal situation. We can't give you advice specifically that. And there's other ways that you can do things too as well. Like Eric specifically speaking to, hey, you're W-2. Hey, how can I make this work? If you're a real estate professional, you're an agent, or you're actively working on the business, this can also be incredibly powerful towards you. No matter what, like doing cost segregation study on whatever kind of property you have, it's an incredibly powerful tool. And so that really should be your key takeaway here. And you can dive into kind of the nuance in terms of, hey, how does this apply to my specific situation and my own tax situation? Because everybody's going to be different. But yeah, no, super, super powerful strategy. Well, Eric, this is the time of the show where we kind of transition to what we call our fire round, just a little bit more brief Q&A. I mean, I could talk shop with you all day, but of course I want to be mindful of your time and whatnot. And I know people want to find out some of your recommendations here, but is that something you're up for?
Yeah, let's do it.
Right on. So for book recommendation, what's your go-to recommendation? And it honestly, it doesn't have to be real estate, it doesn't have to be finance, any of that kind of stuff. It could be, don't tell me romance novels, but if you want to do, if it's mindset, it could be real estate, it could be whatever. Like, what's your go-to? What's your favorite book recommendation?
I will keep it a long theme. There is a book called Tax-Free Wealth by Tom Wheelwright. Tom Wheelwright is the CPA for Robert Kiyosaki. A lot of you have probably heard of Robert Kiyosaki, Rich Dad, Poor Dad. I've seen Tom speak. I've been able to meet Tom a couple of times, read his books, and Tax-Free Wealth is a great book where it kind of takes these tax ideas and puts it into layman's terms. It's a short read. It's an easy read. You can read it in a couple of hours, but it's a great book for anybody who's getting into real estate, who wants to start looking at reducing their tax liability. Oftentimes we look too much, Steve, at how do I increase my number of doors? How do I increase my revenue? And sometimes it's not a matter of increasing revenue. It's a matter of decreasing your taxes, which and then increases your revenue. And so we sometimes get focused I use a sports analogy. We look at offense. It doesn't matter if your team scores 130 points in a basketball game. If the other team scores 131, you still lose. You got to play defense. And so I look at tax planning or tax strategy as the defensive side. Going and acquiring more doors, that's the offensive side. And you need to do that. But if you lose focus of the defensive side or the tax strategy side, it doesn't matter if you make $1 million. If you owe $999,000 in taxes, you only made $1. And so that Tax-Free Wealth by Tom Wheelwright is a great book for anybody who's looking to reduce tax liability.
Absolutely. Yeah, it's a great book recommendation. So if you guys haven't checked that out, you definitely check it out. It's a great one. All right, next question. What would you consider your superpower to be?
That is a good question.
That's awesome sports.
I think my superpower, honestly, is I have a very strong memory. It's really weird. My kids think it's the weirdest thing. We'll be at the grocery store and I'm like, oh, you see that lady over there? That's Joey's mom. I played football with Joey back when I was 8. And they're like, Dad, you're 48 years old. Like, how do you know what Joey's mom looks like 40 years later? And I just have this knack for remembering faces and remembering weird facts. And it has proved to be very helpful in my career and my personal life to be able to do that. And so I guess that's an odd superpower that I don't know where it comes from, but once I see your face, it's locked in here somewhere. And if I see you 20 years from now, I'll probably recognize you. So and the weirdest thing is they never recognize me. So I go up to them like, oh, you're Joey's mom. And they're like, who the hell are you? And I'm like, I'm Erik. I with Joey 40 years ago. They're like, how did you recognize me? It's really awkward, but because they know who I am. They're like, I should probably know who you are, but I don't know. I can't put the face. I'm like, don't worry. I understand. You probably don't know who I am, but
you're like, it's cool. I'm a superhero. Don't worry about that. So if I had some random guy come up to me at the beach in Waikiki, then I'll know exactly. No. Right on. And then, all right. So, and then next question, if you could go back in time and you can give your 20-year-old self some advice, what would you tell your 20-year-old self?
Yeah, I would. And I always butcher this saying, the jack of all trade is the master of nothing or something like that. But basically find out what it is that you do really well and stay in your lane. And then surround yourself with other people who do those other things that you don't do so well. So I've had to learn that the hard way, whether it was refusing to pay the $500 for somebody to install my car radio. I'm like, I got this. And it took me 3 days. I had to go buy multiple tools. And then once I got it set up, it still shorted out every time I turned the damn car on. I should have just paid the $300 to get it installed because that was not something I was good at. And so another story, when I first got into real estate, I'm not paying 10% for somebody to manage my property. I got this. And sure enough, I didn't know what the hell I was doing. It was a horrible experience. Know what you're good at and stay in your lane, and then surround yourself with people who can accent that or accentuate those strengths. So the quicker you find out and be humble, like it took me a long time, unfortunately, I'm a little bit stubborn, but the quicker you can humble yourself and say, hey, I'm not a good marketing person. I'm not a good communicator. I'm not a good writer, but I am good at math, or I am good at this, or I am good at that. The sooner you can humble yourself and find out what it is you're good at, the better off I think you'll be.
That's actually really powerful. And it's not something that we emphasize, I think, growing up. And I've learned this even stepping from, let's say, residential to commercial real estate, from being an employee to being a business owner. It's like, wow, you really start to understand like the power of teamwork. And like, hey, I can't just be, yes, I can be the best me that I can be, but I can't be everything, right? And
Right.
so you hire out the rest, or you bring on some consulting or whatever to help you
Sure.
to achieve kind of higher levels of success. So yeah,
Right. Yeah.
that's very powerful advice. Very powerful advice. Well, Eric, if our audience wants to reach out to you, they've got questions of, hey, about their own situation, their own property, and they want to learn more about cost seg, what's the best way for them to do that?
Yeah, so typically through our website, it's just www.costsegauthority.com. My contact information's on there, my cell phone, my phone, email address. Please use this as a resource guide. Like I said before, we're kind of a niche accounting firm where we just do these cost seg studies. We don't do tax returns. So if you call me and ask me about earned business income or child tax credits, I'm going to direct you back to your CPA. But anything depreciation related, real estate related, we're happy to help. If I can't get the answer, we've got a number of CPAs here in the building who can get the answer for you. I think the weirdest question we've been asked is how to depreciate deer at a breeding facility in Wisconsin. And I'm like, I have no clue, but I was able to get them the answer. So please, again, you guys use this as a resource. Don't hesitate to reach out. We're happy to help any way we can.
Hey, Eric, I really appreciate you taking time out of your day and hopping on with us and sharing with me and the listeners more about like this super, super powerful strategy, guys. I cannot encourage you enough. If it's just something you're looking into or even curious about, like take a little bit of time, dive into it. It's an incredibly powerful tool to help to build wealth, right? And to kind of continue along in your investing journey. But hey, Eric, I really appreciate you hopping on with us today. Guys, make sure you're reaching out to Eric with any questions, or if you've got a property that you need a cost seg on, reach out to him and the team over at Cost Segregation Authority, and they'll take good care of you. Hey, I really appreciate you hopping on, and we'll
I
see you on the
appreciate it.
next
Right.
time.
Thanks. Appreciate it. Have a good day.
Aloha. You too. Great conversation with Erik Oliver over at Cost Segregation Authority. Make sure that you guys reach out to him with any questions you might have about getting a cost seg study done. It really is a super powerful tool. We've used it to great effect on all of our commercial projects. We use it on our short-term rentals. If you're a high earner, it's, man, I can tell you, it's a game changer. Just to Eric's point there, in terms of what, he was sharing, like, hey, I've got a huge tax liability. How do I take care of this? Like, is there anything that I can do? And there may even be ways that you can go back looking at some prior acquisitions you may have in your portfolio to say like, all right, well, hey, I can still use this and kind of bring it forward and apply it to my current tax situation. So very powerful tool. Guys, well, if you're interested in investing with us, go to tricityequity.com. You can learn more about the team, learn more about our previous projects, things that we've got going on now. We'd love to connect you into and help you in your wealth building journey. If you guys are finding value in the podcast, of course, make sure you're sharing the episode, make sure that you're liking it, leaving us a 5-star review. We really appreciate that. That helps us to get the message out to more and more people to help better their financial situation. If you're local, or if you're going to be visiting the island, you want to connect with us here, you can go to 100 Little Multifamily and more. You can find us on Facebook, on meetup.com, on Bigger Pockets. We'd love to be able to meet you in person, help to provide you a space where you can expand your mindset, change your mindset a bit, and see how you can help to level up your investing game and take it to the next level. Guys, that's going to be it for today. We'll see you on the next episode. Thanks so much for hopping on with us, and we'll see you on the next one. Go out, take some action. Aloha.